Hey, how you doing? So HotSkills is something we've done sort of several times over the last year on Hot Houses, where we take one key skill for the PMO space and we kind of spend a few minutes just diving deep into it. And the one we're looking at today is solving problems. So this is something that is, just click onto the next slide, Lindsay. So this is something that is in the competency framework. It's on page, well, 293 in my version. If you've got the CCO one, I'm not quite sure what page it's on, but it's in there. And this is a key, it's one of the key skills that we have for particularly PMO analysts and PMO managers. And the competency framework defines it as the ability to define, determine, and implement solutions to difficult or complex issues. And it must be all of those things. There's a lot of people that are very good at finding and determining the issues that we've got out there, but it is really about actually finding and implementing those solutions to those problems as well. Particularly picking up on the sort of analyst role and the manager role here. This, for me, at least, is one of the key skills that I think differentiates someone who is defined as a PMO administrator as opposed to a PMO analyst, because the analyst role tends to be a lot more about not just following the processes, but actually understanding the data, generating insight, and then moving into that and let's improve things and solve some of the problems that are bubbling up through the data and through what we're seeing out there. So it's quite a big step for sort of junior people in the PMO. It's a skill that they need to master to be able to make it and say, actually, I'm not a PMO administrator anymore. I'm definitely a PMO analyst. It's really important strategically as well as a skill for PMO teams, so strategically in the organization to identify misalignments when problems are arising, help prioritize resources, prioritize programs in our portfolios, but also on a day-to-day basis. It's a skill that we use at all levels, from solving differences of opinion between people in our project teams, helping project managers navigate tricky things, and helping people adapt to change as well, and just improving team dynamics as we go. Onto the next slide. So what I want to do really is just give you a few tools that you can take away and use. And I always try and find a nice simple one. And this is the simplest technique that I could find that is useful and it works. And it's called the STOP technique. And of course it's an acronym, STOP. Basically, for any problem that you're facing, this is something that you can either sort of do in quite a lot of detail, or you can just keep this in your head and talk through this in a problem-solving conversation with somebody. The first one sounds obvious, it's stop and pause, but it's one that we often get wrong. It always feels like if somebody's coming to you with a problem, imagine the situation, right? You've got that conversation, they've grabbed you, they're right in your face, you're feeling the pressure, your fight or flight sort of mode is kind of pounding away. I need to deal with this now urgently. Always take time to pause. Remember that first step of stop. Take a minute, take a breath in, breathe out, just take even a heartbeat, even a second, even a breath before you actually respond to that. It helps you assess the situation calmly. It helps you get in control of the situation and think about what you actually need to be doing and what time you need. And it avoids you going with a sort of gut impulse response to something that might not always be the right solution. Once we've taken that moment, thinking about what the problem is and the potential causes, that's where the analytical thinking comes in, especially for our PMO analysts there. Thinking about, well, what you're telling me about a problem, but what actually really is what you're telling me, is that the real problem, or is there something underlying it? It doesn't have to be in depth. Again, this could be something that's a very, very quick process going on in your head during a conversation, thinking about what the underlying issues might be, and then coming up with options, either something that in that short corridor conversation, that's something you're normally doing in your head, but equally you could be bouncing those ideas off somebody else. Someone is coming to you with a problem. I've got a problem. For some reason, nobody can log into our PPM tool today. Pause, think. Okay, so just to clarify, have you spoken to other people outside of our team? Is it just our office? Is understanding, clarifying what the issues might be, thinking about what the potential causes might be there, and then just talking through options. Okay, so maybe you could speak to the IT team, maybe we could get a message out to people. What would that message look like? Helping people think through and understand what the options are. And then when we're happy, you've got agreement with that person in the corridor, it's then going ahead and proceeding with the most suitable option to move forward with. And the big thing there is taking that decisive action, giving that nice, clear direction and move forward. like all things, as Eileen's just mentioned in chat, it's a really, really simple process on paper, but actually when you're faced with those challenges, it's a hard one to actually remember. And I personally find the hardest step is that very first one, which is the simplest of all of them, which is just stopping, taking a breath before sort of diving in impulsively on something. A slightly deeper model, if we just move on to the next one, this is called A3 analysis. And it's called A3 analysis because I know a lot of people think, well, A3, what, like the piece of paper? Surprisingly, yes, this actually was named after the piece of paper and the A3 paper size. And the idea was, this comes from sort of lean management, where they wanted to have an A3 sheet that summed up the entire troubleshooting, the problem-solving process you were going through. And this is how it's laid out on your A3 piece of paper, defining the problem, identifying it, and you see here, I'm not going to go through each of these in turn, but there's questions under each of these sections here. So again, what is the problem that we're facing? Are there any particular KPIs that we need to focus on? Is there any historical content that we need to take in when we're trying to focus on what the problem is? Once we've established that, we're just making notes of it in these sections, because the idea is not only is this a way of thinking about the problem, it's a way of communicating it as well. We can take this A3 sheet, stick it on the wall in our area. If we're remote, share it in SharePoint, so everyone can see what's going on at any given point as we build this out. Then we're looking at the current conditions. What is actually happening? Focusing on facts. Where can we get real data in here, and how can we visualize those in a graph, in a data table? But we're trying to take this down to data, take the emotion out where we can, and focus on the data that help us analyze the situation. We also want to be clear there on what the goal is. So we know what the problem is. We know about the current conditions. What are we actually aiming to achieve? Is it a quick fix for now to get us, if we've got something that's broken? Is it about fixing it immediately? Or are we looking for long-term solutions? Or actually, are we going to do one pass to solve a quick problem and then something longer term? Can we all align on what we believe we're here to try and solve today, even if there is a different goal we're trying to focus on tomorrow? Once we're clear on that lot, then we can dive in, analyze our problem, understand the challenges. There's lots of techniques we can use, and I'll mention some of those on the next slide, things like 5 whys, fishbone diagrams, brainstorming, which is the same as our options in our stop model, deciding what we want to do, then coming up with our implementation plan. And again, depending on how complex, how long-term this is, that's either going to be a sort of Gantt chart, a couple of bullets of what we're going to do, but we're also being clear here on what done looks like. What are the metrics? What do we expect to see? And crucially, who is it that's going to be accountable for these things? And we shouldn't forget about the last step there as well, that once we've actually gone through this cycle, how do we then follow up and track the progress? If we've improved a process, and this is mainly about improving processes, what are we then doing to actually make sure the changes that we've made stick and stay and are aligned? I've got a template for the people that are on the Zoom call. I will share a link to that template in just a second for you. In terms of techniques that you can use within that A3 or generally, there's a few. I'm not going to go through these in any detail, but 5 whys technique on the top right there, fishbone diagrams to break down a defect and understand where the issues might have been caused. Bottom left there is De Bono's thinking hats. De Bono, bonkers character, but he really championed the sort of parallel thinking, taking everyone through thinking about this, where we're in favor of an idea, where we all disagree with an idea, where we're all external consultants, wearing different hats and thinking about things in the same way at the same time, rather than everybody having a heated argument about things. And the last one, top left there, comes from design thinking, empathy maps. Trying to get under people's skin. What is the problem? And when we're thinking about what the problem is, actually, how does it make people feel? And often when we're thinking about things through a process lens, it can be really good to do this, to think about the empathy side of things as well. How do people really feel? I suppose think about how people feel comes on to our problem-solving mindset, right? So what is it that we need to, what mindset do we need to be in when we are problem solving? There's a few things here. We need to be curious. We need to focus on our resilience, because if you're solving problems, it tends to be high adrenaline, high pressure, high stress. So make sure you're resilient. Think about how you can make time to calm yourself and how you've got the things you can do to build your stamina to deal with these situations. Need to be adaptable and flexible. But the crucial thing, I think, for PMO people that are called out there is that very last one. It's being solution focused, finding solutions over finding problems. I think in the PMO space, we can be guilty of going in, auditing, seeing where the problems are, surfacing those problems. But actually, what we really need to be doing here is finding solutions to those. So that's it from me. I'll share a couple of templates in a second. To summarize, practice that stop model so it becomes intuitive, so it comes naturally to you when somebody grabs you in a corridor with a problem. Build your toolbox. There's a few ideas that I've given you there, the 5 whys, the A3 technique as well. And crucially, nurture your problem-solving mindset. If you know what the mode you need to get yourself into to solve problems is, you can get yourself in that way of thinking whenever somebody hits with a problem, and it gets you on the right foot to solve those things going forwards.